Teddy Talks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Teddy Talks After Hours, where we pause, PAWS, of course, rewind and unpack each episode. This is the part of Teddy Talks that's for grown-ups only. So if you're a parent, maybe your kiddos are finally off to bed, yes, or maybe your teacher and those guys are out for recess. Whatever it may be, you're having a little break to chat with us, and we appreciate it because now we can talk sort of straight up to the parents and educators out there listening. So I'm here with Danny Tieger, our guest on Teddy Talks. And as you learned in the Teddy Talks, he's a songwriter, a performer, an author, a teacher, a Renaissance man whose work has been licensed in many TV shows and movies. And he's written a book, I Am Your Songwriting Journal, which is a guide for kids to turn their ideas into amazing songs. So Danny, let's get to know you a little bit better. Can you just share with our listeners what prompted you to get into songwriting?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Rebecca. I was thinking about this question a bit. I grew up in a household where people were songwriters. My dad was a songwriter, and not that he was actively writing little songs all the time like I am today with my children, but I just believed always from the beginning that people could write songs. And I think a lot of kids live in a space where they think like, oh, well, that's a song. It's got 15 kinds of instruments on it. It's got, pop singers. It's unsingable. It's, I don't even know what that sound is in the background, and so writing a song feels sort of separate from their experience. And so when I started playing music a little late, sort of in middle school, I started playing so that I could write songs. And that's always been a part of myself, really, is that quality. That's what started it for me.
I love that. And, as a parent myself, my husband is the parental songwriter in the family, and he has sung many songs about changing diapers and getting on your pajamas. And it really just adds a little bit more fun in your family day.
Absolutely. It's the mnemonic device that we all need all the time. My son, I've started to notice, my youngest is 3, and he, if he's waiting for something, he'll be like, I am waiting to leave for school. I am waiting to leave. He's like already doing that thing, which is like processing the world through a song, which is great.
I want to come to your house for a minute because I feel like it would be like watching like a live musical. It's just everyone like breaking into song and dance with the regular everyday routines.
It's like a live musical movie because I feel like in movies, everyone sort of stops and is like, why is that guy singing? As opposed to stage musicals where they're like, of course. And I know the choreography too. In my house, they're like, okay, we get it, Dad, but can we just have our peanut butter toast, please?
Right. And I will spare all of the listeners out there for the Jammy By song and getting into your Jammy By. Maybe another time I'll have my husband on the episode to share that beautiful score and composition.
Wouldn't that be amazing if parents just sent in their dirty diaper songs and they're like, for the love of golly, please go to bed songs, and that oh man, I would love that album. That just 130 songs about just eat that. Please just finish your plate.
If you're a parent out there listening and you have a song, write
Send it in
at teddytalks.com. And I'm not even kidding. All right. So here on the show, we pause, rewind, and unpack the episode. We're going to start with the pause first. So this episode was all about helping children find their voice, developing self-confidence. Why do you think this topic of talking to kids about finding your voice is so important?
Well, I love what your writer chose to do in terms of focusing on acting as a means for that. I've been a director in schools a lot of my professional life, and there's an incredible moment where a kid discovers an idea that's in themselves, right? They've been given these other lines, they've been given sometimes feelings for a scene, and yet they're able to find themselves in it. It's really, it's spectacular. And it does happen in classrooms and in music classes and all over the place, and sometimes in one-on-one conversations with trusted adults. But I do think that theater tends to be a place, especially in elementary and middle school, where that discovery of your voice as this part of your identity happens. And it's always I always feel so grateful that I am present to it when I see it.
I 100% agree with you. As a school psychologist, I work with kids who maybe are shy or have anxiety. And then when I see them sort of blossom on the stage, like you have to like do a double take. You're like, whoa, like look at them really coming into their own voice and that acting as if. And it really is a beautiful moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fake it till you make it idea that even if you don't feel whatever, if you don't feel whatever it is you want to feel, suddenly putting on this other mask or this other hat or this other costume. I mean, that's what it was for me as a kid. I put on this costume and be like, oh, I can do literally anything. And all of the concerns or fears about like, am I growing up the right way? Am I cool enough? Spoiler alert, no, I wasn't. And that's fine. But as soon as I put that costume on, I was like, no, I am. Here we go. And spending time in those other places within yourself it's so useful for developing an imagination, which is ultimately what gets you through anything than an imagination, that you will be on the other side of the feeling, that you will be on the other side of the hardship or the challenge. Imagination to me is number one.
And we have a lot of, Teddy Talks listeners who are littles, right? And just watching kids, get out their superhero costume or like transform into a dragon or, Elsa or whoever it is, like we can really harness that power of play. So parents out there, all of that unstructured, imagining it as if playtime, that's a dress rehearsal for real life. So
absolutely. Like it makes me think like that if you tested how fast a kid could run on October 30th, it would be one number. And then if you put everybody in their Halloween costumes, the whole average would go up by like 5 miles an hour. That you just puts on the Wonder Woman costume and they're blazing across the field. I don't know if the data would support that, but I'd love to find out.
If you're a researcher out there and you want to study,
time your kids and send it to Teddy Talks.
Wow, we're just really coming up with all kinds of ideas today. All right, let's rewind this episode a little bit, Danny. So in this Teddy Talk that you gave, we learned that everyone feels shy or self-conscious sometimes, even adults, and that it's really natural to feel scared or shy, especially when you're trying something new. So as a teacher, how do you help your kids get through that sort of getting out of their comfort zone and finding their voices, whether it be in writing or song or art or classroom participation, raising your hand? How do you help kids with that?
That's a great question. I am lucky that I teach sort of smaller classrooms, but 12 to 18. And so I can look around and say, all right, well, those 7 kids have no problem raising their hands and getting into the fray. And those 3 kids are right on the fence. And maybe those 10 kids are, and I can think about what sort of engagement a kid is going to need. For me, in terms of finding your voice as a writer, I come back to that imagination that I think that if you are not quite sure, and as a 5th and 6th grade, teacher, you're maybe these kids are writing their first paper, which they're trying to share a thesis. And what is that voice like? What does an authoritative academic voice sound like to talk confidently about the themes of a novel or something like that? And I think imagination is the way in. You sit there and pretend like you are the foremost authority on this book. And so you don't have to say things like, well, I think it's because of this and it might be because of that. Just say it confidently. And when that happens, when those kids can click into a confidence in their own ideas, then I think it translates into group discussions or asking a question or sort of demonstrating that they maybe don't know everything, which of course none of us know everything. So that to me is where what I try to focus on as a teacher. And as a songwriting teacher, which is a little different, I just try to get kids to write about what they think is true. It's a little different from an academic space, but when I teach songwriting, with me, you learn the first chord and then you write a song that only needs 1 chord, because tapping into the performative quality of sharing your ideas is something, it's something that I wish I had found much sooner. I knew that I could write songs. I did it, but I didn't connect it to the kind of learning I was doing. And, I'm sure I have chemistry teachers who are listening today who know that If would have been much better off if I had written a song about the noble gases in order to remember them, or had written a song about the Pythagoras theorem or something else. So I'm trying to connect kids to that idea.
It's a really great segue to my next question, which is the rewind portion, which is rewinding to your younger self, whether it be when you were a kid in that chemistry class or whether when you were first starting out as a songwriter. Knowing what you know now and having a lot of reps in putting yourself out there and trying, and those Lego bricks of stacking up to your confidence, what advice do you wish your younger self knew about finding your voice and overcoming maybe self-consciousness?
I think the advice that I would have given, or the advice that I would give myself, is not to focus on trying to write a perfect or even a great song. I think especially early on, I was focused on the quality of something, and it sort of was at odds with the process of writing it. And so now when I write a song and when I teach songwriting, I make sure that we're never erasing a lyric, especially on that first page or napkin or back of math homework. I'll only ever cross a line out fully legible underneath my single strike through. And I that's for two reasons. One, it's so that at the end of writing a song, I look down and I see the good work that I did, the process that it took to get to the product. And the second thing is because you never know when you're going to get to that song and think, oh, you know what? I know I had an idea about, a great metaphor about benches. Where was that bench line? And instead of it being underneath 30 versions of the line about something else, it's right there. And that's the advice that I would have given. I found that lesson pretty early on in my professional career, working with some amazing producers who just knew exactly what they wanted to do in a studio. And it's made a big difference in the writing that I've done since.
That's great advice, because as a school psychologist, I see kids who maybe aren't proficient or fluent or confident in their writing, and they just erase, and like almost like a hole in the paper erasing, just
absolutely.
And there's great ideas that might be under there. Something on the cutting room floor might be brought up for another idea. So just savoring the process and not working out so hard to make it perfect the first time right out of the chute. And I've written a number of books myself, and this is how I describe the writing process, which isn't the most beautiful thing. I would like to have a better metaphor, but I like vomit everything I know on a page. And then I work with that, right? Like instead of trying to find that perfect sentence, because then I'll have nothing.
Well, especially now, with like speech to text, being able, that's another thing that I'll teach my students. If you're feeling like I have the idea, it's just, it can't get out through my fingertips, which is already like sort of a crazy thing that we do, right? We have an idea up in our brain, and then we force it to go all the way down through our like chest and arms, out through our hands, which are obviously fidgeting with something, and then have to like type a very specific pattern with our fingertips in order to articulate that, like jeepers. So, getting the first big chunk of text out onto a document just by speaking some things that are true is such a useful way to get going. Because then you're not staring at that blank page with that flashy cursor that's saying like, you got any ideas yet? You got any ideas yet? You got any ideas? It's out there. You're already working, right? You're just improving what you already came up with.
I love that. That's sound advice for parents and kids alike. Let's unpack this episode. At Teddy Talks, we share big ideas for little ears, but we know that we have adult listeners who are listening right now. So what is one thing you want the big ears listeners out there to know about how to talk to their kids about finding their voice?
I think especially with siblings, some modern shows have done a really nice job of introducing this idea of like, when do you speak for your sibling, older or younger? When should we speak for each other? And when should we leave space to find our truth? I often think of the difference with students and also with my children, both my actual kids and the little kids in my life, that the difference between being extroverted and just being right on the front of all conversations and being present and being introverted often that difference, that natural difference in some kids can mean that some of our quieter friends get like trounced. And it feels like such a benefit that their older sibling is filling in the words for them or doing that. And as much as we can, both in the classroom and, at family dinners, really try to open and leave space with like directly asking individuals questions instead of posing things to the group. A question posed to the group is going to get the loudest voices. And when it's targeted and you're really trying to ask something specific of an individual, I think the difference can be huge.
That is a really great practical advice. And I also do this thing where after I ask a student or my child something and they don't answer right away, I actually have to force myself to count to 10 in my head. And you will be so surprised, parents, teachers out there, if you ask a question and you actually just extend your wait time, it feels like a really uncomfortably long part of time. But
Sure.
In fact, some students need a little time to process and formulate their ideas. And then what comes out of them is just magic. So I love what you talked about, like giving space for kids to respond.
I love that idea. Wouldn't it be amazing if I asked questions of my kids 10 or 15 less times than I do every single day? I could devote some of those second, third, and fourth askings to just sitting in silence. I might do that later today.
If you're a parent out there who wants to experiment with this, let us know how it goes. And hello.
Send us those 10 seconds. Care of Teddy Talks.
So I will ask you a question. I will pause 10 seconds to let you respond if you need the full time.
I won't take the time. I think I will just jump right in.
I'm going to ask you a very big bonus question, okay? So I don't know if you know this, but Grizzlette was my actual childhood bear. I'm holding her up for anyone who's watching on video. And Grizzle was my sister's bear. We had many playful moments together. Do you remember having a favorite item from childhood, like a childhood bear or a lovey? Tell us a story about that.
Oh man, well it was in the previous century, but my Aunt Bertie gave me when I was like 1 year old a Daniel Tieger, like original stuffed tiger. And this is before Daniel Tieger became the international sensation. It was just like a friendly puppet in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood back then. And that tiger, for whatever reason, amongst all the other things, loved things that came in and out of my life, that tiger is definitely still kicking it. I don't have it at my desk, but that's just because, we're speaking from my classroom. But that tiger has seen it all. It's in like a sitting position. It's always been on a shelf. It wasn't like a high active tiger. And I think that's probably because it was sitting in like a position of repose. But yeah, I when I see that stuffed animal in my children's hands, it really is like, I'm just Marty McFly. I'm like 32 years all swirled into one single moment.
I love that. That is your childhood lovey, because when I first read your name, I read it wrong as Daniel Tieger. And I was going to ask you in this interview any relation to Daniel Striped Tiger. Now I know that it's Danny Tieger, but now I feel like karmically, like it's come full circle that we were meant to talk about Mr. Rogers and his neighborhood and his wonderful tiger.
I'm waiting for the time where I get accidentally hired, to play some big show as Danny Tieger, and instead like everyone shows up in the like orange and striped shirts and they're like devastated that it's me. I get them back, obviously, like I'd get them dancing and singing, and we'd make up some songs in real time, but it'd be a tough start. It would be some work.
Well, we appreciate you having you, and we, no matter how you pronounce your last name, are thrilled that you were here and wrote a beautiful song for us. And we hope that this episode inspires big ears and little ears alike to find your own voice, and really appreciate you having you here. And everyone out there, we'll see you on the next episode of Teddy Talks. Teddy Talks, Teddy Talks, Teddy Talks, Teddy Talks.